the folks from Finland, Indonesia, Mexico, Armenia, coming together just to say hi and join us today. So I think it seems like I've stopped getting the influx of like 10 people all at once. So I think we're ready to get going. And if folks join later, that's also okay. Yeah, let's go. Hi, welcome to the Machine Learning UX Meetup. I am your host, Michelle, and we're so excited for you to be here today. I'm personally very excited because we have Milda from Thomas Reuters Labs, who's going to be sharing about designing AI explainability, but also her Chi paper, which is, I think, also really fantastic to have like a Chi paper. This is our first like kind of Chi talk adjacent, trying to get people hyped for Chi and also for your paper that you'll be presenting at Chi. So I'm just going to do a quick round of like, hello, welcome to MLUX and kind of what we're doing today. And just a heads up to, please feel free to follow us on Twitter at MLUX Meetup. And tweet out your favorite parts of this talk or anything too. We're always interested in what you're interested in. So definitely feel free to tweet us out there. Yeah, so woohoo, we're doing it. Yay, you're in the right place if you are looking for designing AI explainability features, a case study with the Machine Learning and UX Meetup, Switzerland edition. So thank you, Milda, for joining us from Switzerland. A little bit about who we are. Hi, I'm Michelle. I'm the organizer and founder of MLUX, but I wanted to just acknowledge there are a ton of people behind the scenes who help make this possible. So thank you to all of our volunteers who've helped us a ton before. We were doing in-person events, now that we're doing virtual events, and so many volunteers. We would not be possible without volunteers. You may have noticed our events are free. That is because of these amazing volunteers and speakers like Milda, who are really just here to share their knowledge with our community. So just thank you for all that. So I saw there are some new faces. Some people are sharing this is their first time. Welcome. What is machine learning and UX? That's something that I get asked all the time. So how I like to think about it is, how do we use data science techniques to inform and drive UX design decisions? So maybe something like unsupervised learning on UI click metric data in order to create clusters of our users, or just answers, you know, what are our top priorities of features or something like that too. But also like, how do we just design better experiences that let our users know what's happening with their data, how they can give feedback, how to make it more explainable. Hint, hint, Milda's going to share a little bit about that today. I'm also going to say, for anyone who's in the room, and might not know what UX is, totally cool. I'm just going to say it. UX is a lot more than pixels on a page. I would say I'm a UXer, but you can see my slides are in black and white. Like, you do not want me to design your brand or colors. We had a volunteer do all of this. So it's really about like, what is the experience? And I really think that we should be thinking about the experience of machine learning and AI, and that's a whole reason why we host these. The data side too, you know, I'm boiling down machine learning, AI, stats even, all into this data. And so like, how do we come together and talk about these best practices? So when these do come together, we get amazing experiences like this. This is the Pinterest visual discovery. And I love this example because it's like, I have no idea what this person is searching for, but as they scroll through search, they are able to reseed the search right within that screen, looking on the lower right-hand corner, and they get a bunch of images. We don't know if this is like NLP of like, oh, maybe they're looking at hashtag pizza, or maybe it's computer vision where it's like, oh, here's a bunch of other images that look similar, but basically you're not making the user go back up to the search box, articulate what they're looking for, all that stuff. It's just like a seamless ML experience, and I think that's great. So this and so much more. I have also written up a quick article if this is at all of interest. You could take a look there. But so that's about like, what is machine learning and UX? But our vision as a meetup is really to create a collaborative environment between UX, data science, and everyone in between, and really to organize that community to host these like best practices, case studies, all this stuff too. I will say it's because of amazing folks like Milda who stepped up and like, oh wait, I have something to share, that we're able to host these events. So just thank you, Milda, for doing that and contacting us. If you are at all interested in like, I don't know, following us, we're on like all of the platforms. So here's our meetup. We also record all of our talks. So just like this one is being recorded, this will go on our YouTube channel. And the last thing, oh, I guess we also have a LinkedIn that's not on here. We have a LinkedIn group. I'll ping that later. But this is our Twitter account as well if you're interested. So follow us there, check out our prior stuff. We try to package it up so that way anyone, even if they are all over the world or on different time zones and can't join for some reason, you're still able to learn, because I think this is really important and valuable. So thank you to all of our past speakers for sharing their knowledge. Okay, on that note too, MLUX can't happen without you. So just thank you to all of our volunteers. But if you are interested in, I guess less of sponsors right now because we're not hosting in-person events, but we're looking for people to give talks. If you have a cool case study that you'd like to share that you think is interesting and can move the field forward, we would love to have you come and share that knowledge with us. If you're interested in volunteering, no MLUX experience needed, or if you see something cool in the field, totally tweet at us, hashtag MLUX or at MLUX Meetup, please tweet at us. Also, always feel free to contact us, humans@mluxsf.com. Yes, we did not have the foresight that we were going to be outside of SF, but that actually pings a couple of us. So we would love to hear from you. So yeah, thank you. I also want to thank Feminist AI. So the reason why we're free is we're a part of the larger Feminist AI nonprofit. And so if you are at all interested and want to support Feminist AI, you can go to Feminist AI is the website. And it's all about reimagining AI for everybody. And I do free tutorials for them, as well as we try to at least once a year get their community members to speak to our group and just really think about, what is the future of AI and how do we make it accessible for everyone? So yes, and if you did donate tickets, there's an optional donation for tickets that actually goes straight back to our Feminist AI nonprofit. So thank you for supporting that programming. Yeah, okay. So that is my intro and welcome. On that note, I want to wrap up because I am just so excited. Milda, senior designer at Thomas Reuters Labs, is going to be sharing a case study on designing AI explainability features. Milda, I'd love to just hand it off to you to introduce yourself and kind of share that. And then we'll do questions afterwards. So please put your questions in chat.
Sounds good. Thank you, Michelle. So is it all right if I share my screen now?
Yes, totally.
Okay, I can see actually that the host disabled screen sharing, but
oops.
Yeah. Oops,
oh,
yes.
No, I need to more. Clara, I might need your help with this to make Milda a host.
Oh yeah, of course. One moment.
Sorry about this.
Oh, don't be sorry.
Clara is our amazing volunteer, again, another volunteer from Feminist AI. So thank you, Clara.
Of course, it should be all set.
Yes, exactly. It is all set now, and hopefully you can all see my screen now. Can you see it?
Yes, thank you.
Fantastic. Okay, so yeah, so thank you very much for having me today. I'm really excited to share what I learned and how I went about designing AI explainability features. And yeah, and let's get started with that then. So basically, right now I am a senior designer at Thomson Reuters Labs. And Thomson Reuters is a pretty big company, which has quite a lot of different products living within it. So the three main pillars that we specialize in are products for accountants, such as, for example, Onvio. Then we have a lot of products in the space of legal, such as, for example, Westlaw UK, which is a research tool for lawyers and other legal professionals. And then the third, probably most important one is news, Reuters News. Hopefully, at least some of you will have heard of one or a couple of them. And what Thomson Reuters Labs do, so they work across the entire product portfolio of Thomson Reuters, and we specialize in AI solutions. So we work with, for example, the product manager and subject matter experts of specific product, and then we work to build an AI solution for that product. And so because of that, our expertise centers around three main areas. So the first one is, of course, data science. Then we have engineering, and then we have UX. So we have a design team, which I'm part of, which specializes in user experience of AI solutions and also, for example, data visualization. So with this introduction, then we can move on closer towards the topic of explainability. So what is explainability? So explainable AI is an umbrella term for quite a range of techniques and methods which accompany outputs from AI systems, the goal of which is to make them explainable. And it tries to address the undesired black box nature of many of AI systems, especially the ones that are powered by deep learning, with the hope that this can help users to understand and therefore trust more the AI solutions that they are encountering. And it can also be said that explainability is quite an important barrier in terms of making the AI more widely implemented than practical implementation of it. So we can also see that explainable AI has increased and become even more important in the recent years. So in terms of, for instance, the amount of work that has been dedicated to it. And it's also known as interpretable artificial intelligence. And basically, its growing importance is reflected in the amount of work that's being put into it as well. So this is not just because it's a nice thing to have, it's also because if we look at a rather still scarce amount of AI regulations, where they seem to be headed is that, for instance, if we look at GDPR, it does talk about the subject's right to an explanation of an algorithmic decision affecting him or her. So it's not just something that, if we do it, the user will trust it more. It's also it's also something that it seems that we will have to do as an industry and professionals working in the field of AI. So also important to mention that, so this talk is going to focus on the work that I did on explainability from the perception and perspective of the end user, so somebody that is interacting with the outputs of the model. However, explainability can also be important and should be considered also from the perspectives of regulatory bodies that basically try to determine whether AI decisions are made in a safe and a fair manner, if the model complies with the legislation, and also, of course, AI system builders such as data scientists, which try to understand whether the system is working as expected and what should be addressed in order to, for instance, debias it and make it work better. So now our use case. So the product that I worked on basically sits within our legal product space. And we have a team of editors that go through court cases that we receive, and they have to, among other things, enter, for example, some metadata, who are the plaintiffs, defendants. They also have to summarize the allegations that are in that case. And this information then goes into our legal products that the customers can see, and they can, for example, reading this information, can find new business opportunities and decide who to represent in a court case. And basically, there's quite a lot of information that the editors have to, extract, go through, and this is a highly manual, long, tedious process. So for this reason, we've decided that we could support them by building an AI summarization, text summarization solution. So after experimenting with quite a few models, we've settled on a pointer generator network, which is a deep learning model. And also from evaluating the model with the subject matter experts in terms of getting them to determine and decide whether the summary is good enough to be published or not without knowing which summary was written by the model and which one was written by the editor. We then determined that, although the model is doing quite well in generating the summaries, this should be a human-in-the-loop solution where the editor has to take a look at and verify each summary. And this is another kind of important point to mention, that so in this particular case, we had abstracted text summarization. So abstracted text summarization is when you generate a text summary where the summary can potentially contain new phrases or sentences. So it's not just extracting the words or phrases that are in the text and using that to create a summary, which is what extractive text summarization is about. And the reason this is important is I think that some of the learnings that came out of this study and the work that I did, apply quite well to abstractive summarization, but it's a question on whether they would apply just as well to that extractive one. So then, you might be thinking, okay, you had a model, it was performing quite well. Why explainability? Where does that come in? Well, when we've developed the model and we started kind of putting it out in front of SMEs, limited number of them, and then we ran a series of interviews, what we heard was that the users felt they still had to look at an entire court case to verify the summary if they were to do that properly, because these were also the instructions that they've been presented with. And they said, it would be really helpful to see, what the model had been looking at when creating the summary. And so we thought, okay, well, could we support the editors further with adding explainability features to the summary review process? And would this explainability feature reduce the time spent on validating the automated summary? And could it help to increase the editor's trust in the AI system? So the two explainability methods that we used for this were attention vector approach and the source attribution approach. So the attention vector approach used the attention scores produced by the model at the time of the prediction to show which parts within the source text did the model pay attention to when generating the summary. And so this results in different intensity of text highlights, where the darker blue means that the model has paid more attention to certain words, and the lighter blue means that the model paid less attention to that. And then the second approach was the source attribution approach, which is a model-independent heuristic to identify one or more sentences in the source text from which the summary language primarily comes from. And actually, the reason we introduced the second method was that the first one, basically, as you do natural language processing, you need to tokenize the text and also use an OCR engine to extract the text from the PDF document, which is what we had in this case. And mapping that back to the original document can be actually quite a challenging process. So we wanted to see if we could go with something that was model independent and would be just as good. So a bit more information about the second source attribution approach. For the more technical audience members, it's essentially one or more sentences in the summary is assigned the value of 1. So this is the text that had influence on the summary based on the collection of sentences that yields highest normalized bigram precision score against the source text without excessively sacrificing recall. And then all remaining sentences are assigned the value of 0, which is why we had one shade of blue only. So that is text that either had influence or didn't have influence. And there's a lot less of blue overall. So to test this and to show this to users, we had to put it into a web interface. So this was the attention highlights condition, as I like to call it. So you can see here the summary that the users had to review and potentially edit if they thought that this was necessary. And then this is the court case text, the source text, which, as you can see, has many different shades of blue. There's also the possibility to go to the original PDF, which did not have the highlights, in case the quality of the source text was not very good. But this didn't happen very much without the study. And then what we also have is this page jumper concept, which is essentially helping the users determine which of the case pages were the most looked at by the model, in case, for example, they wanted to jump directly to that page, the page that the model paid most attention to. And then finally, of course, we also have the scale that helps users to read the highlights and to understand how to interpret them. So then the source highlights condition was pretty much identical, as you can see. Once again, the only difference is that there's, here, there's only one shade of blue. Because of that, there's only one shade of blue, and typically, usually only one or two pages that had color in the page jumper. And the scale is modified to represent the meaning of the highlights here. And then finally, we also had a control condition, so no highlights condition, where there are no highlights. The page jumper is still there, but there's no color, of course. And another important, I guess, point to note that, so this interface kind of loosely represents the real application that the editors, the users work with. However, of course, like all the additional tasks that they have to do are removed so that they could focus on the task of just verifying the summary here. So in terms of the method of how we tested this, let's first pay attention to here, the round one. So in round one, we tested, whether working with attention highlights would be preferable to working without highlights. And the reason we did it that way was because we basically wanted to see if the participants were faster when working with highlights. So this meant that we needed a control. And we had 2 participants in total, because this was meant to be just a rapid pilot study, where they were both exposed to both conditions. So both participants had to work with attention highlights and also without the highlights. However, they never saw the same case twice, as you can see, but we always had a control for the highlighted case. And yes, they were timed in terms of how much time they spent reviewing each case. And then after completing their work in each condition, they had to fill in a quick survey. And then at the end of that, we conducted an interview. Now, round 2 of testing was done 3 weeks later, because we needed some time to set it up. And then we had the same 2 participants. The setup was very similar, that they first, had to work with source highlights, then without highlights. This was the other way around for the second participant. They never saw the same case twice. There was always a control. They, of course, didn't have to answer the survey again about the condition with no highlights, because it was the same condition. But there was an interview once they did that. And then after that, I also asked them to do just a few cases, again, with attention highlights, just to give them a reminder of what it was like to work in this condition, which was then finally followed by another interview, which was then followed, and this interview was focused primarily on comparing the experience of working with 2 different kinds of highlights. So now moving on to the results, what we learned from our time data was that the participants were significantly faster when working with attention highlights. However, the effects of source highlights on their performance was much less clear. And you may be thinking, well, hold on, maybe just one of the editors was, faster and not the other. But no, this was not the case. We took a look at that as well, and we could see that regardless of, their individual editing speed, for example, or approaches to it, this gain in time still persisted, even if we had a look at it per editor. And again, with source highlights, it's a lot less clear, what's going on, if there are any gains, or why there are no gains in some cases. And this was where our, very thorough interviewing outline has helped us. So we learned why this was the case primarily from the interviews. So, of course, one of the key themes was trust. And with source highlights, when working with the source highlights, essentially the editors have said, well, do I just trust that one section that was highlighted it just doesn't feel like I've done my full job as a reviewer. And sometimes I spend more time making sure that that one highlighted section is correct. And actually, because this method was trying, to match what was in the source text with the summary, like there wasn't always 100% match, which decreased the trust even further. And now with attention highlights and all the different shades of blue that it had, it gave them a sense that the entire court case was looked at. So even when occasionally the AI system got it wrong, it made them trust it more. And this is actually really interesting because before we ran the study, we had some of discussions about this with our data scientists. They thought that all the lighter shades of blue would be really distracting for the users, and it would be noise, and basically that maybe the users would want to just go to the core of the summary, which they actually did do with the page picker, but still having those different shades of blue was actually helpful for them, and it gave them that feeling of trust. And then in terms of the use cases for the highlights, so the source highlights were primarily used as a way to target, where the details relevant to the summary might be, where the model might have drawn from. However, they weren't always there, and also not always the actual relevant detail was highlighted. Whereas the attention highlights did help them get there to that meat of the summary, as they like to call it. However, in addition to that, this kind of slightly lighter shaded blue also gave them additional details that they had to review, and sometimes they even chose to add to summary. So basically, it helped them enrich the summary. And then, interestingly, according to one of the users, there was a time when the summary was wrong. So basically, it thought that it was a car accident, but it was an insurance case. However, looking at the highlighted text has helped them in realizing this and actually correct it. So it also helped them even to correct the AI system. Then in terms of the survey, so this is just a kind of an illustration and the snippet of the findings, because, with the users, we couldn't do a super huge analysis. But it was essentially an adaptation for the system usability scale with a couple of additional items that I have created myself around, understanding what parts of the source document the system used to generate the summary, and also trust. Just to kind of help put the answers on the scale and help that compare across the users that we tested with. And what you can see here was that overall, the attention highlights, so the light blue circles, they kind of always tend to be a little bit more to the right than everything else, which suggests overall more positive experience when working with them, as well as higher trust and better understanding of where the summary had come from. So it just essentially verifies the other findings from the interviews and also the timing results that we got. So based on this study, we came then to the following conclusions. So that explainability features actually can create measurable benefits in terms of time savings. And that well-chosen explainability features can provide users with more interactions between AI system and the user. However, as we have seen, not all methods to enable explainability are equal in the benefits they create. Actually, with the source highlights, it's rather questionable whether this was so helpful, because even though the users had said, we would prefer to work with these highlights than no highlights at all, if we look at the results on time, if we look at the trust that has decreased every time the source highlights were wrong, that doesn't really seem to be the case. And because of that, I think the explainability methods really should be designed to task. So we should research what the users would like to use the explainability methods for, what specific use cases the explainability methods have on their own, rather than just explaining a specific AI prediction. And finally, that actually some of the metadata that gets produced by the models during the prediction can be pretty important, because I think in recent years, the focus in the industry has very much been, just providing the final prediction and then perhaps some post hoc methods to provide explainability. But actually what happens during the prediction by the model itself, being model specific, can be pretty important as well. So for more details, please feel free to read the case study. As Michelle has mentioned, this work has been accepted to CHI, where I will present it in just a couple of weeks. And if you would like to, mention this work or talk about it as well, feel free to do so, but please, reference us. And this work is not up yet on ACM. However, you can download the preprint, which is where this QR code will take you. And with that, I say thank you for listening to me, and I would be happy to answer any questions.
Unmuted, but yay! Awesome! Thank you. And I'm rapidly tweeting out all of this, some screenshots. Thanks, Milda and team. And big thanks to everyone who has been retweeting or tweeting at us. I am always really excited to see what other people find useful and valuable. So thank you. And especially because we don't have any questions in the chat. So please do add your questions in the chat and we'll ask them here together, but I will now take it back over. I really enjoyed that case study. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and background and kind of like all the things that y'all have learned. So I'm going to do presenter view. And yes, if you are at all interested in following along with other things that Milda is up to, definitely check out her Twitter is Milda_Nor. Yeah, we'll just move into the questions portion now. So we have a question from Bob. Did your work cause the data science team to reconsider what models they're using for these types of tasks? Can you share a little bit about that?
Sure. So in terms of this specific project, I mean, we had already kind of before experimented with quite a few models. So we kind of knew that this one was, the one that we wanted to go with. And then we did this additional work in terms of layering explainability on top of it. I think that there's been some discussions on that maybe it's worth to understand the explainability needs of users more early on in future projects than what we did, because if some models, for instance, are too black box in their nature, but they don't have the same way to represent explainability, and if it's really important in that case, then maybe that's not the best. And then another, I think it's less about which models they use and what specific models they use. It's more what this study has made them, I think, rethink how we evaluate what is a good model, because before very much the focus, and especially with deep learning work, I think used to be on, okay, we have the really great F1 score, or of course in summarization, maybe it's Rouge, or the percentage of summaries that are considered publishable, or very good precision, which is what we're going for, or excellent recall. But actually, maybe and of course it's still important to have these things, but maybe the other thing that is also really important that we should be looking at is, how much do the users trust these models? How does that reflect on the improved workflows? And I would say that it's not a concept that has come very easy to some of our data science teams, because this has more to do with the performance of humans and less with understanding specifically what's going on with the model itself. But there's been, I think, a shift in thinking, and there's really, I would say, many more of our teams, when they work on projects, they set up tasks where they also try to evaluate, what benefits do the different models that we work on bring to the users.
Awesome. Thank you for that answer too. And yes, I love kind of what you were saying during your talk as well about like, oh, the data scientists were so sure that like, you know, the light blue everywhere was going to be noisy, but then actually users liked it, but then they liked it for different reasons. Like, I think that, you know, one of the things I find myself saying all the time to different data science teams is like, your model could be the coolest thing ever, but if it's not usable, no one's going to want to use it. And I think this was a really great case of that. And love that you're thinking about like, what are our users, our end users actually trying to think about? Yay, thanks. Okay, I have a question from Maureen. I thought the conclusion of having explainability features centered around tasks really interesting. Do you have any thoughts about how you might evaluate explainability when it's tied to specific task-based feature? How would you separate, or should you separate the performance of explainability versus the task or feature itself?
Well, that's just the thing. I think that if we're saying that explainability has to be, well, first of all, it has to be, you have to choose which audience perspective you're evaluating from, right? So here we had the end user, and result might have been like very different, you know, for, I don't know, a regulator or a data scientist, for example. But secondly, it's also, you know, like what is the task really matters, because after I did this research, actually, we had a talk by someone, well, his name was actually Branting, you can look up his paper as well, who used attention scores as well, and attention-based highlights in a different task. It was also in a legal domain. I think it was to evaluate intellectual property related disputes or something like that. And basically the bottom line being that like the way and what the attention scores and the highlights were for were quite different from what we had them for in my setup. And they found that, you know, those attention highlights were not helpful to users at all. So I think it just goes to show that, you know, if and when we're evaluating the explainability methods, they have to be in a specific kind of context and for a specific task, which is, I guess, in a way, a little bit unfortunate, because of course, we would love to generalize, right? To say that, you know, okay, we can abstract this or that and whatnot, and if we did this, then it will apply everywhere else. But I think if we are truly focusing from the perspective of usefulness, that seems to be one of the things that's kind of showing across. And that's why, and actually very importantly, this is where UX comes in, right? Because we really truly have to start by understanding the user needs. And not just for the AI solution that we're building, but also around the explainability needs for it. And, you know, what really can they bring to the user, and what specific use cases they might have. Because again, I don't think I have conclusive enough results to really be able to claim that. But what does seem I can see a kind of a trend that I think the more use cases the explainability methods have, especially as a standalone thing, the more useful they're going to be. So it's not just, for example, a score or something like that, that, oh, hey, you can trust this or you don't trust this, but it's also like, what can the user do with them in addition to just understanding what the model looked at or why it made the decision.
Oh my gosh, totally. Yeah, I also feel like with a lot of new like innovations like this and everything too, it's kind of like, it's hard to evaluate just right now in this time shot, because as you know, like users, once they become more familiar with it and all this stuff too, they're going to use it in different ways and more interesting ways. And like, I think like some of the work that y'all are doing is part of this larger ecosystem of like changing really how these kind of features come arise. So that's another reason I'm so excited for you to share it with us. I did get a direct chat question about, can you tell me, I'm going to try to summarize too. Can you tell me a little bit about what it's like to work on a team of data scientists and designers? We have a ton of like different folks in the room, from TPMs to people on machine learning. How does that collaboration actually work? And what are some tips or recommendations that you think folks should know?
Sure, I can try to share. So I think it helps, or what helped me initially is just that it's really not being too afraid to admit that maybe you understand something or you don't know something, because at least, you know, in my team, like all the data scientists are extremely lovely, very good at what they do. Also, always happy to help, discuss or refer you to resources for, as long or as much as you need. And for instance, on my part, whenever, we tested like some early stage ideas, like some kind of reasonably low-fi prototypes, just to give users a sense of, what this feature could work or look like, does that make sense? Does it not make sense? Is it a good data science direction? I used to try to invite the data scientists I try to invite the data scientists to these sessions so that, they get to hear the user kind of themselves. And then, for instance, we have like the debrief together. So I would say that it's kind of a process where, our two disciplines get to share our strengths, right? We should share our strengths. So for instance, from the UX side, like our process, maybe the research methods that we know or have in terms of like, researching users' behavior, what matters. And from data science, we can draw from their incredible knowledge about like the models and, the different maths that go behind it, etc. And just really be open in terms of asking questions and communicating and thinking things through.
Yeah. Awesome. Yes. Like everyone has their own superpower. Love it. I have another direct point. So I wanted to also acknowledge, thank you to all the folks who've now posted some questions and everything too. I don't know if we'll be able to get to all of them, but I'll try to summarize maybe some of them together. I have another question that came to me via direct message around, can you share a little bit about how, I think it's just so unique and cool that you managed to get a Chi paper out of this. I know there's a lot of folks in the audience who are kind of like, wait, I'm a practitioner just like Milda. Like, how do I maybe share out my case studies and stuff with the larger community, of course, through MLUX Meetup. But like, could you share a little bit about like, what sparked you to do a Chi paper and like what that process looked like for you?
Yeah, so I think, so actually we did this work within Thomson Reuters reasonably quickly, like in a short time frame, but the amount of discussions that this has caused, previously, as I said, in terms of like what we should be focusing on, like how to bring in explainability more, etc. I think it's really kind of made me and also my team realize that, hey, we might be like onto something quite interesting here. And also I've, of course, read papers from Chi and watched talks in the past. So actually this is going to be like my first Chi ever attending, and I'll be also speaking there, like, which is pretty cool. I would have never probably imagined that like 2 years ago or something. But I think, so yeah, that has kind of realized that we were really onto something. And so I literally just went to the website, read the requirements for what they were looking for, and I thought, yes, I think this does kind of fit into that. So I just asked for some research time. We have that privilege with MTR, like 10% to be able to work on turning this into a write-up. And I let this kind of work, but the other team members that I worked with me on this project also contributed to it. We assigned tasks to each other, and then we submitted and it went through. So I think my biggest piece of advice is that if you think you have something cool, just do it, just share it, because you probably do have something pretty cool.
That's awesome. And also, yeah, thank you for sharing that process. I know it seems like a no dumb moment of like, I went to the website and I realized I have something cool, but like, I just think that's awesome. Thank you for just like thinking of this and sharing it out. I pulled up, I think maybe the site that you're thinking of like your papers and submissions and look at the deadlines, but there's also late breaking work and stuff too for other folks. But I personally am just so happy to see this at Chi and just see a lot of these really cool case studies, because I personally think like this is one of the great ways to kind of share out not only best practices, but like that experimental method that you also shared as well. And like, how do we kind of co-design a better future around machine learning and AI explainability? Okay, sorry, that was a lot. I see that we have a couple other questions. I'm going to move into the final question, if that's okay. And then if we have a little bit of extra time, we can all just hang out online and talk. But as you've seen, we have like 40 plus data scientists, designers, PMs on the line. What would be one piece of advice or feedback you have for all of us to take back to our teams like today?
So I think that, yeah, like one piece of advice would be that, you know, start with really understanding the user and the user needs. And as we've seen from this case study, this applies to like explainability as well, like in terms of like really like for the explanations to have value. And do not be afraid to just, you know, experiment really, because and to try more than one thing and to kind of benchmark it, because we are in a pretty novel field. There's not a lot of answers that are kind of set in stone. So you can be like someone who experiments and who helps to find these answers, and we can, you know, build this road towards explainable AI together.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yes. And when you experiment, totally come back and ping us and let us know what you experimented and what you found. Maybe we could do another MLUX on it too. I love that of just like, yeah, Milda, like I mentioned, you're totally pioneering this of just like, hello, here's some design treatments. I think like that's really cool. So just thank you for sharing your time and energy with us. Very quickly, I also wanted to share too, there was this really great kind of like CHI 2021 HCI AI Roundup published by Daniel Blushek. So I just pinged that in the chat too. I thought that was awesome. We also, Milda and I definitely tweeted at Daniel. We're like, add Mildas, add Mildas. So it seems like there's a lot of really cool other CHI papers coming up. If you see some others, totally tweet at us. I love it when people take a screenshot of like, oh, there's this cool paper reminded me of hashtag MLUX or at MLUX Meetup. I think that's great. The other thing that I wanted to share is that save the date. Our next MLUX event is going to be May 24th with Professor Katie Shilton from University of Maryland. She runs the Ethics and Values in Design Lab. So if you're at all interested, definitely we'll send out the information in Eventbrite shortly. And wanted to also give a big shout out to the Feminist AI community. MLUX is a part of the Feminist AI nonprofit. All of our events are free, but they're free because of amazing volunteers and speakers like Milda, who were like, I have a really cool thing to share. So thank you, Milda, for sharing that. Thank you for all of our volunteers. Bob, I see that you joined. Bob also writes up a lot of our articles for Medium and everything too. And yeah, just thank you to all of you for joining, because we wouldn't have a community without you. So on that note, I'm going to actually stop sharing, and maybe we could stop recording. How do we stop recording? Clara, we might need your help with that too.